The fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the white plate, the sound sharp enough to cut through the soft hum of the restaurant. Her face lost its color in seconds, her body stiffening as if time itself had paused. Most people noticed but looked away, unsure, uncomfortable. One man didn't. A single dad who had barely enough money for that meal stood up before fear could tell him to sit back down, and in that single moment, his life quietly began to change forever. Before the story goes any further, if you believe that kindness deserves second chances and that small actions can change lives, take a moment to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel Kindness Touch. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. Ariz Rahman had learned long ago how to live unnoticed. He was 37, a widowed single father, and every day felt like a careful balancing act between responsibility and exhaustion. That afternoon, sunlight poured through the diner's wide windows, casting soft shadows across worn wooden tables. Ariz sat near the window with his 8-year-old daughter, Inaya, who was quietly coloring on the back of a napkin because crayons cost extra, and he didn't want to ask. The diner wasn't fancy, just clean and honest, the kind of place where people came for comfort food and left without thinking too deeply about anyone else inside. Ariz had counted his cash twice before ordering. One shared meal, 2 forks and water instead of soda. He told himself it was enough. Inaya smiled anyway, and that smile alone made the sacrifice feel lighter. He worked nights as a warehouse supervisor and days as a father, sleep becoming a luxury he could no longer afford. Still, he never complained. Life had taken his wife in a sudden accident years ago, and since then, silence had been his closest companion. He believed that as long as his daughter felt safe, he could endure anything. Across the diner, a woman sat alone at a corner table, sunlight reflecting off her neatly styled hair and elegant yet understated clothes. She looked out of place, not because of wealth, but because of the weight she carried in her posture. She ate slowly, distracted, her eyes distant. Ariz noticed her only because Inaya had pointed out the pretty bracelet on her wrist. He nodded and smiled, then returned his attention to his daughter, unaware that fate had already leaned closer. When the woman's fork fell and her body stiffened, Ariz reacted before logic could catch up. He crossed the room quickly, his heart pounding, the noise of the diner fading into something distant and muffled. He remembered his wife's medical emergency years ago, remembered how precious seconds could be. The woman's breathing was shallow, her hands trembling, her eyes wide with fear. Ariz guided her gently, helping her sit upright, signaling for water, doing everything he could with calm urgency. Other diners froze, unsure whether to help or step back. Within moments her breathing steadied. Color slowly returned to her face as she clutched the edge of the table, grounding herself. The crisis passed as quietly as it had arrived. A manager rushed over, asking questions, offering help, but the woman shook her head, visibly shaken yet recovering. Ariz stepped back, suddenly aware of his worn jacket, his tired eyes, the fact that he had crossed a line from invisibility into attention. He returned to his table without waiting for thanks, embarrassment creeping in despite his good intentions. Inaya looked up at him with wide eyes filled with admiration, and that alone was enough. He finished the meal, left exact change on the table, and walked out into the bright afternoon, the sun warm against his face, unaware that someone inside watched him leave with quiet curiosity and gratitude. Days passed, each one blending into the next with familiar routines. Ariz returned to work, lifted boxes, managed schedules, and came home to help with homework and cook simple meals. Bills piled up on the small kitchen counter. The landlord's reminder sat unopened, heavy with consequences. Ariz told himself he would figure it out. He always did. Kindness, in his mind, wasn't a transaction. It was just something you did because it was right. One clear morning, sunlight flooding the narrow street outside his modest home, a sleek black car pulled up in front of his door. It stood out like a shadow in a place that had grown used to dull colors and predictable sounds. Aris watched from the window, confusion knitting his brow. The car's door opened, and a sharply dressed man stepped out, his posture professional, his expression unreadable. He walked to the door and knocked gently, as if aware that he was stepping into someone else's fragile world. Aris opened the door cautiously. The man introduced himself as Kareem Holt, a private driver. His voice was calm, respectful, but carried a weight that suggested importance. He explained that he worked for a woman named Alara Voss, and at the sound of that name, something clicked faintly in Aris's memory. The diner, the bracelet, the afternoon sunlight. Kareem handed him an envelope, thick and heavy in a way that made Aris uncomfortable. He didn't open it immediately. Kareem explained that Alara had asked him to personally deliver it, along with a message of gratitude. He spoke of Alara as someone who valued discretion, someone whose life was surrounded by wealth but often starved of sincerity. She had asked questions after that day, learned about the man who helped her without expecting anything, and felt compelled to reach out. Aris finally opened the envelope once the driver left. Inside was a letter written with care, words filled with genuine appreciation, and an offer that made his hands tremble. It wasn't charity, the letter emphasized, it was opportunity. Alara was a successful entrepreneur, a billionaire whose life had been built on precision and control. That afternoon in the diner, her medical emergency had reminded her how fragile control really was. Aris's calm presence had grounded her when fear threatened to take over. She had learned about his situation through quiet inquiries, about his late wife, his daughter, his work, and his struggles. The letter explained her desire to invest not just money, but belief. She offered to cover his outstanding debts, ensure stable housing for his family, and provide him with a position at one of her logistics companies, one that valued experience, integrity, and leadership. There were no conditions attached, no obligation to praise her or repay her beyond continuing to live with the same kindness he had shown her. Aris sat at the small kitchen table for a long time, sunlight streaming through the window, dust motes dancing in the air. He felt overwhelmed, suspicious, grateful, and afraid all at once. Pride whispered that he should refuse. Fear warned him that accepting could invite disappointment. But then Inaya walked in, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her smile bright and trusting. Aris realized that sometimes strength meant accepting help, not because you were weak, but because you were human. The changes didn't happen overnight, but they came steadily. Bills were paid. The weight on his chest eased. Aris started his new role, surprised to find himself respected, listened to, and valued. He still worked hard, maybe harder than before, but now his effort felt like it was building something instead of merely surviving. Inaya moved into a brighter home where sunlight filled the rooms, and laughter returned in ways Aris had forgotten were possible. Alara never sought public recognition for what she did. She and Aris met once, in daylight, in a quiet office filled with glass and open space. There were no dramatic gestures, only mutual respect. She thanked him again, and he thanked her too, not just for the help, but for reminding him that kindness could echo far beyond the moment it was given. As time passed, Aris made it a point to notice people the way he once went unnoticed. He helped where he could, mentored new employees, volunteered at his daughter's school. He understood now that kindness wasn't about grand gestures. It was about choosing to act when it mattered, even when no one was watching. Near the end of this story, if this journey has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Touch.